Great, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Dowd. I'm the Deputy Executive Director over Policy Operation and Compliance at the Department of Community Health. I'm very excited that we are doing a town hall today on registration. So I'm glad everybody's here, and I'm glad you're participating because this is an important step in EVV. So we always start every presentation with the mission of the Georgia Department of Community Health, which is to provide Georgians with access to affordable quality health care through effective planning, purchasing and oversight. Next slide. So today we're just going to do some very quick reminders for me, status updates and timelines, functionality phases, once again go over the training resources, give you an overview of the new EVV call center, communication resources, then we'll turn it over to Telus to provide information on registration and a third-party vendor update. From there, we'll do Q&A. I do want to let folks know for today's presentation, Q&A will be limited to registration questions only. So we're keeping the focus very much on registration questions only for today's presentation. So I'll be reviewing the Q&A and going through, and those questions that aren't related to registration, we'll make a note of it. And you can always send those to the EVV mailbox as well and get your own written response. But we won't be answering any questions that are not registration related. Next slide, please. So I just briefly want to go over some of the high points again, just so we can re-emphasize them for EVV. I get a lot of questions to the mailbox continually about what services are covered in EVV. And we've even had some folks try and register for EVV that aren't PSS or CLS providers. So EVV is specific to community living supports and personal care support services in the Now and Comp waiver, source, CCSP, ICWP, and GAP. Whether they're consumer-directed or traditional providers, it is only for community living supports or personal care support services. So if you try and register with an ID that is structured family caregiving, it's not going to work, a provider ID, because that's not part of EVV, right? Or if you try and register with an ID that is for adult day health, that's not EVV. So that provider ID won't equate to us because it's not one that's associated with EVV. Next slide, please. So I'm very happy to let everybody know that we are still on schedule for tomorrow being the solution start date. We are still working with third-party vendors. We have bi-weekly meetings with them now. I mean, that's fiscal intermediaries. We continue to work with third-party EVV vendors to get them on board. Telus gave us a very good overview yesterday in one of our meetings of where they are in different buckets of providers that they are continuing to work with who have third-party vending, and I'm sure Joe will go over that a little bit later. The training has been continuing all month in the face-to-face training, not face-to-face, but virtual face-to-face, live training webinars on 3 different topics. Those have been going all months and going very well. And registration and the call center are now both available. We have had many providers yesterday that were able to register. So we've got a lot of folks registering and are already active in the system. And we've had call center calls. So we've had multiple calls go to the call center already associated with EVV. So again, we've been doing training all month. Registration was available as of yesterday, and many people were able to register on March 29th. The system will be ready tomorrow. We'll have our initial training complete, but that training will continue ongoing through the life of EVV. We have ongoing support, all of our websites and call center information. In May, we'll be continuing to do a recruitment campaign, everything from we're doing call outreach to providers. That has started a call campaign where we're calling providers and asking them where they are in the process. We're also doing system refinements between April 1st and July 1st. just cosmetic things largely. We don't have any like large defects or problems with the system at all, but we are doing just some system refinements to greater enhance the usability of the system. And then we are still moving forward with that July 1st mandatory EVV claims processing. So I think we've gone through most of these things, but just to reemphasize, we are here in this phase 1 as of tomorrow with the system up, with telephony options becoming available, and we should have that exception form available on the website here by early next week. We expect that form to be available for anybody who doesn't have a cell phone or that can be used, or if there is a medical condition by which the member has a sensitivity to electronics. Those are the reasons we will be considering for use of telephony. The call center is available. The claims will become available in May so that we can start to use that and make sure that we're refined and people become available and familiar with it. And then 7/1 is our cutover date. That's when claims will be required to be submitted, and we'll also bring up the case manager functionality at that time. So we wanted to actually highlight for you where available training and training resources are for the EVV solution, TELUS, and all of the website guides and previous town hall registration links. So all that webinar and town hall material is available on our website. So that includes how-to guides. We've definitely tried to provide multiple ways of doing the training and learning. So it may be these town halls, it may be the webinars that are live, it may be recorded videos, and we also have paper instructional guides as well, old-fashioned manuals. Next slide. The call center is also available. So as I said, the call center was available as of yesterday. This is the call center number that you see here, 833-701-0012. There is an email address, so not everybody has to keep emailing the DCH EVV mailbox. You're welcome to, but if you're looking for technical support on registration, you may want to look at this EVV mailbox that goes to Conduit as well, because that's a much quicker resource. I'm just going to be forwarding your question most of the time to that, to the Conduit folks to get an answer as far as registration goes. So it's probably a lot more efficient for you just to go right to the source. And there's also a website for chat, which we have here. Another really good feature that we've done associated with EVV is a cheat sheet. So we have a cheat sheet that's available that you can, and it's available on our website that you can just click into, that goes over everything you need to know. It's kind of like a toolkit for the EVV system. Okay, so before you say, oh my goodness, I needed that call center number and all that, and I couldn't write it down, I'm going to remind you again that all of our presentations, all of our slides will be available on our website, which is right here, this top bullet, sorry, not number. So we will have this recording and this presentation available on that website. It'll probably be early next week. We try and get them on as quickly as possible, but there's a little processing that has to be done with the recordings. Some of y'all write me at the end of the day when we do a presentation at 9 o'clock, you write me at 5 o'clock and say, the presentation's not up. Yeah, the presentation isn't going to be up the same day. So I need folks to just be a little bit patient with us, because it does take us a couple of days. Usually doesn't take us more than 2 or 3 days, but we get them up on the website in 2 or 3 days, and you're able to have full access. You don't need to write this web address down. Just Google DCH EVV and it'll pop right up right there in one of the first 3 results you get back. It's one of the top results. EVV mailbox is still open, and as of yesterday, I had 3 or 4 unanswered that were just sent in yesterday, mainly around registration issues, but I continue and others continue to monitor that mailbox, most of the time you are talking to me. I do most of the responses to those. So sometimes you guys say, hey, can you tell Brian? And I have to write back, this is Brian. So I am fully aware of all the email messages that go into that box. So you don't have to worry about the information being passed to me. If someone else responds, I'm already copying on it. Again, all the PowerPoint presentations are on the website. We do all of our flyers and announcements, readiness surveys, FAQs. Most of the questions we receive are on FAQs, and the town hall materials and the recordings. This one and the one tomorrow that we're doing at 6 p.m. will be available on the website. Again, probably early next week that'll be available. Next slide. Okay, that's it for me right now. I am going to turn it over to the Chief Customer Officer for TELUS NetSmart, Joe Schnurr. Take it away, Joe.
Great, thank you, Brian, and good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing great. It's good to be with you again. Today's an exciting day because we talk about how do you all get access to the EVV system. This has been a long journey getting here, and lots of town halls and prepping everybody, and now it's time to start using the system. So I am going to go through, let me show you, 2 types of registration. The first one is, how does the billing provider register? So this is, think of it as the billing agency, if you will. Whoever's going to do the billing. And the reason I put the word billing in there is because agencies may have multiple billing IDs, and you will have to register for each ID. So I'm going to go through that. I'm going to go through the guide. So Brian did a great introduction and showed you how we have resources in multiple places. I'm actually going to go to the website, show you where they're at, how you get there. I'm going to pull the guide down. I'm going to walk you through the guide. Hopefully you'll find the guides very easy to follow, but we'll go through that. And if you have any questions, please do put those in the Q&A box. The second type of registration is, how do I register each of the users? So think of administrators, billers, schedulers, of course, all the aides. Everybody needs to get access to the system. So we're going to talk through that as well. Okay, so let me execute out of this. Okay, so first I'm just going to pull open a search bar, and as Brian has told us many times, it's very easy. You put in Georgia, DCH, EVV, and I hit enter. And you can see that it's the first one available. Right here, Georgia Electronic Visit Verification. So if I click on that, it brings me to the Georgia EVV website. And Brittany, who's our communications person, has done really a fantastic job at making everything available on this website. So I'm going to get down to the service providers tab here over on the left. And you can see there's a whole bunch of resources here. So you can see there is how to register a provider agency to use TELUS EVV. So I downloaded this a little bit earlier. It's just a PDF. So I'm going to walk you through this document. Okay, so if you are an agency and you want to get access to the EVV system, here's how you do it. And again, there is a note up here that if the agency has multiple locations and different Medicaid ID numbers, then the agency will need to complete this process below for each location. And I keep stressing that because this has been one of the challenges that we've run into early with providers, because we've gotten a few calls. Providers have registered for just one of their locations. They go in and they're like, oh, all my recipients are not in my system. All my authorizations are not here. That's because those authorizations are identified with a different location. So again, I want to stress that multiple times, that if you have multiple Medicaid IDs, you will need to follow this process for each ID. Okay, so step one, providers should assign somebody to go through this process. It should be a senior level person, like an administrator, because this person is going to get access to all of your recipients' information. So that's step one, is assign the right person to do the job. Okay, so now you've assigned somebody. This individual will go to this website. So let me go ahead, and there's even links right in here that you can click on, and it will go right to the web page. So you don't even need to type it in. Very easy. So what this did is this took you directly to fortellis.com and the Georgia DCH website. And you can see there's an overview and there's a registration. In case you missed this part, a little further down, it says, how do I register? Click here. Both will take you to the same spot. Okay, so let's click on this one here. And it brings you to this page where there's a form to fill out. You can see that you need to put 3 numbers in here. One is your billing provider tax identification. It's often referred to as your EIN number. Again, an agency administrator is going to know what that number is. The next one is the payer provider ID, also known as the Medicaid ID. And Brian, do you want to talk about, I know you walked me through, there's a few differences on Medicaid ID. Do you want to mention anything about the type of ID we're looking for here?
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe. So I know, and I've even seen that the first question we got into the Q&A is associated with this, and it really tees up the question very well. So remember earlier when I said that I was talking to some people yesterday that were trying to enroll as a registered provider and they weren't part of EVV. Well, the same thing goes for you if you are part of EVV and you have multiple IDs, right? So I always use the same fictitious company for myself, Brian's House of Inspiration. So Brian's House of Inspiration has a provider ID number that is 123456, right? And I know that's not enough characters, but that's what we're going to go with. My payee number is 123456A. Does my payee number have anything to do with EVV? Is it a provider of EVV services? No. I have another number that is 123456B, and that number is contracted with CCSP to provide PSS, right? Well, that's an EVV service. So here I need to be putting that in, 123456B. I also have another service that I do, which is, in this case, I'm going to use the same scenario so it makes sense, adult day health. So I have an adult day health center too. So that number is 123456C. If I put that C number in here, it's not going to work because we don't do EVV for adult day health, right? But then let's say I have a PSS number for source, not CCSP, but source, and it's 123456D. If I want my source members too, and I want to pull in their PAs, I need to use that. I need to also register that 123456D number here so that I can pull in those members as well. So you need to know what your provider IDs are. And I know maybe that hasn't been a focus that we've had with you in the past, And I can tell from the emails that I was getting yesterday that we haven't done a very good job of explaining what those IDs are. But those IDs are associated with specific services and specific contracts. And you need to use the appropriate ID in this spot that is associated with CLS or PSS in order to move forward with the registration. Did I miss anything there, Joe? Tell me if I did.
No, I thought that was awesome. I'm so glad I asked. That was an excellent overview. So really, thank you so much for that, because that has been a confusing point. So so again, thank you for that. The zip code. The zip code is associated with the office that you are trying to register. So I've been looking at the data, and many of you have multiple offices with multiple zip codes. So you will need to add the zip code for the office that you are registering for. So those are the three numbers, and then you click I am not a robot, and then the submit button will illuminate. All right, so let me go back to the instructions. Okay, so we just went through step 2, you went to the website. Step 3 were the three numbers that we just talked through. Step 4 was you click the I am not a robot, and then you click the submit button. Okay, step 5. So after you hit that submit button, it's going to bring you to a second page. The page is mostly going to be filled out. There's only two spots you need to fill out. One is a provider short name. What does that mean? Okay, so you can see the first box is the provider name. And your agency that you're registering for, you might have a long name. Well, in the application up at the top of the page, and I'll show you this, it won't display a long name. And if you have multiple offices and you need to switch, the system allows you to switch between offices. So if you're an administrator and you need access to 5 different offices, you'll have a drop down that will easily allow you to jump from office to office and see the different visits and all the information that's in each office. So when you click that drop down, it's going to be these short names. So you're going to want to think through, you could call it Office 1, Office 2, Office 3. You could call it the street name, whatever makes the most sense for you. But this short name will be the name that will be displayed in the TELUS system. Okay, the second thing you need to enter is your email. And again, this is the person that the agency has selected to register for this billing provider. So you're going to enter in your email. Why is the email important? Well, the email is where the credentials to sign in are going to go. So whatever email you put in here, it's going to auto-generate an email with your username and your password. And it's going to send it to this email that you put in this box right here. So again, just 2 things you need to fill in. Then the submit button will illuminate, and you can just hit submit, and you will get that email. Now, make sure you don't change any of the other information. You can see that it's in there, and if there's something that you don't think is correct, then you should report that. But don't change anything, because this is the data that's been sent over in the file. Okay. Step 6 is the email that I just mentioned. Once you hit the submit button, that email is going to auto-generate and go to that email address. And then it's going to give you your username and a temporary password. You're going to have 36 hours to get logged in, or that temporary password is going to expire. So hopefully, if you're registering, you're going to do this immediately. right? You're going to follow through the whole process until you get logged in. You're not going to, oh, I'll look at the email later on, and then you may forget. And then you're going to have to call support and get them to reset your password. And it's just a lot of extra work that you can avoid. So just, we recommend go through the entire process and make sure you get logged in. And that's pretty much as easy as it is. This should really, honestly, take 2 minutes. If you have these 3 numbers ready to go, this should be a 2-minute process, potentially faster, but let's call it 2 minutes. So if you have 10 offices, you're a big agency, you have 10, and you have one person doing all 10 offices, okay, it might take you 20 minutes. But this is not a long process. The key, really, the mistakes that we see being made are all in these 3 numbers. And honestly, all in really the one number that Brian walked through and did an excellent explanation on. Most people get the EIN correct. It's that next number that they get incorrect. Sometimes we see the zip code incorrect, but it's typically the second number. So I would say spend some time, make sure you understand what those numbers are, and before you go to register, and so you can get it correct. Now, if you're really struggling, not a problem. We have support, which Brian walked you through how you get support. And support will be able to look up your EIN and understand what this ID number is. And they'll be able to help you with that. But again, most of you shouldn't need support. You should be able to do this yourself, but we do have support if it's needed. Okay, so again, the main goal today is to go through this. So in review, you start at the website, you download this file, how to register. It's going to bring you to this PDF that we just walked through. Hopefully you can see the steps are pretty easy to follow and you can get registered. Now, who needs to register? I think I even saw some emails about, or some questions about, well, we're using a third party. Do I need to register? Or we're a fiscal agent. Do we need to register? So anybody that is going to use EVV, so you're providing the services that are in scope, you're going to need to register for EVV. Now, you may be using a third party, and that your visits will be clocked in and clocked out on a different system, but then that data will flow over into the TELUS EVV system, and that's how you're going to bill your claims. Now, as Brian mentioned, billing is still a month and a half away or so. So do I have to register today if I'm using a third party? You don't have to. We'd like you to, but you don't have to. You can wait until you're closer to the claims. Just so you know, we are going to be running a report every week to look at who is registering, because we do know that, you know, it's almost 4/1. 7/1 will be here very quickly. And we want to make sure that you are all giving yourselves plenty of time to get through the processes, and make sure you understand how the system works and you can use the system. That's why we provide lots of training and live webinars and multiple different ways that you can learn. But as anything, we do need to actually do it to make sure and confirm that we know how to do it. So we would recommend, and we would hope that you can register soon so we can get everybody through at least step 1. And then the other thing is that your authorizations and your recipients are already loaded in the system. So the first thing you can do, even if you're using a third party, is you can go in and say, are all my recipients here? Did they load properly? Are all my authorizations here? Did they all come over? So you can go in and start looking at that information right now. Okay, so hopefully registration was clear. And if you have any questions, please do ask. All right, so the second topic, if I go back to my page, so we just went through number one, billing provider. Step number two was, okay, now I've got my agency or my billing provider all registered, and I checked, and sure enough, my authorizations and all my recipients, they're all here. Great. What do I want to do next? So if you're going to use the TELUS application for EVV, meaning all your aides are going to log visits on the mobile app, then you need to get each of your users registered. So how do I do that? So we, again, provide lots of help in how to do that. So let's go back to the Georgia website. And there's another document on here, how to manually add users in EVV. So if I click on that, it's going to download the file, and I can open the file. And it walks you through step by step, just like the other one, step by step, how do I load my users? Now, this instruction is in multiple places. We have a video on this, which I will show you. If you go to the live webinars for the administrator console, we will also walk you through how to do this. You can go to this guide that's on the Georgia website. And there's even a user manual on the training website. So that's at least 4 different ways that you can basically get to the same place on how to upload users. And again, we believe this is pretty easy to follow. So this, again, assumes you already have access, because what you're seeing here in this picture is the administrative portal, which we've done previous town halls on. But of course, you have to have access. So you have to register first in order to do that. So once you register, and now I want to start adding all my users, you come under the users tab, you click the little plus button, and you enter in an email or a phone number. So why do I have to do that? Well, because there is a chance that the user that you're trying to register is already registered. As we know, some aides work at multiple agencies. It's even possible that an aide registered even in a different state. We've seen that. And maybe they moved and now they're an aide in Georgia, where they were an aide in Florida, and they were already on the system. So what it does is when you enter in their email or the phone number, it will search our entire database and look for that user. And if it finds it, it's going to pull it up. Now this is a do not use, but it will pull up the first name, last name, part of their phone number, and part of their email. And if that is your user, and you'll need to confirm it with them, you just hit invite user, because that user already had a profile set up. So the system is easy to use in that if the profile is already set up, you don't need to reset it up. All you need to do is invite them to your agency. If this is not the person that you're trying to invite, then you hit this other button, invite a different user, which is right here in step 3B. If the number or the email, if we couldn't find it in the database, then it will bring you to this screen, and it will say no user can be found. You can see it in this little box up here. So that means that user's never created a profile in our system. And not a problem, you can create the profile for them. You can see there's a little asterisk next to certain fields. You will need to fill in those fields if it has an asterisk next to it. And all of that is explained right here on the left-hand side, what each of those fields are. So, and then you just hit invite user if you pull down on this scroll bar, it'll say invite user at the bottom. And that's as easy it is to add the user. Now, when you hit the add user, guess what it's going to do? It's going to send them the email, just like when you register for the billing agency. And remember, you hit submit and it auto-generated that email with your username and your temporary password. It's going to do the exact same thing to each user. It's going to auto-generate the email as soon as you hit invite user, and it's going to say it's going to send it to that email that you entered, and it's going to say you've been invited to join ABC agency, whatever your agency name is. And then if they're already registered, maybe they're registered with a different agency, they'll just know that they've been invited to join yours as well, but they already have a username and password set up, so they don't need to redo that. It's just notifying them that your agency is inviting them. If they've never set up a profile before, then it will ask them to set up their profile on the mobile app. So remember, the aides are using the mobile app. So they will have to have downloaded the mobile app, get that email, type in the username and the temporary password in the mobile app, and then it will ask them to change their password. And then they're ready to go. And then on this tab, you can see over here on the right, invite status. See where it says, these all say accepted. But if you've just invited them, but they haven't went in and changed their password, it will just say invited. So we do that so that you can come into this tab, because you are likely going to be inviting lots of people to join. You're going to be adding lots of users, and you need to keep track of who's went through and accepted it, and now they're in, versus who didn't. And it still says accept or invited. And you'll need to follow up with that person and make sure that they are following through with the process, because again, they also only have 36 hours. So you're going to need to think through, how many people do I want to invite at once? Because let's say you invite 50 people. That's 50 people that are going to need to go in on the mobile app and put in their username and password within 36 hours. And you're going to need to keep track of that. If they don't, then you're going to need to reset their password. So it's just going to create more work. So hopefully that's all helpful to get through, again, these two steps. Billing provider registration, that's really step one. And then once you're in the system, you can confirm your data is correct, and then you can start inviting all your users. So I know we're 20 minutes remaining. Brian, does it make sense to give the third party update, and then we can get to the Q&A?
Yep, makes perfect sense. Thanks, Joe.
Okay. All right, let me put it in presentation mode again.
You want me to do this real quick?
Sure, you can if you want to.
Okay.
There you go.
So we just keep an ongoing view of where we are with our third-party vendors. Joe does an excellent job of doing a deeper dive for us here in the department, but it's important just to know that those folks that are in blue are folks that we have a signed agreement with, we have contracted with. Those folks in green, and it's exciting for me to see all the extra greens from the last presentation, because that's a lot more green than we used to have. Those are folks that are in the middle of testing. So that is going way up. And then the folks that are in just the black, those are folks that we have not contracted with, but that we have had some initial contact. The one that is here in this peachy orange, I'm a little colorblind, forgive me, is that is the one agency at this point that has declined integration. So if you, as a agency are using this company as your EVV, you need to have a real conversation with them, because we are going to require it for claims payment as of 7/1. If they're not going to contract with us, I would strongly suggest that you begin to use the TELUS EVV system for CLS or PSS, or quite frankly, you will not get paid when the claims system processing becomes mandatory. So if you do have this provider, you need to be planning on using TELUS for your EVV system for CLS or PSS, unless they choose to integrate. Next slide. So I'm going to do this real quickly. We're holding the upcoming town halls just for whatever topic we feel is most necessary for us to talk with you guys about. We don't have specific topics as of yet, and that is very intentional, because we want to be able to target it to what we feel like you guys need to hear most. Okay, and I think that brings us to our Q&A section. Again, I'll only be answering questions related to registration, but there is the EVV mailbox. You're welcome to send things into that on overall policy, and I'll be happy to answer questions there. Okay, let's see how many of these 28 we can get to. And Joe, I probably need your help on a few of them, so I'll be calling out on you. So the first one is, when I register, I'm asked for a Medicaid number, like we talked about. Do I need to do separate registrations for source and CCSP with the A and B at the end of the provider Medicaid number? The answer to that is yes. Whatever, if you have two separate contracts, one for source, one for CCSP, let's say you have a third for ICWP, you will need to register all of those IDs, as Joe said, within the system to get all of your members there. Next question. It's worth mentioning that scheduling a call with Fernando makes registration go very smoothly. That's not a question, but I always like a shout out for Fernando. He's in the call center, and he will, as Joe said, that they will help you in the call center if you need help. That's why we got the call center already up and running. Do we need to register if we'll be using a third-party vendor? Joe answered that, and the question is yes. If we are a DD provider, we only have to add provider number for CLS services. Also, if we are doing case management for source, that is not an EVV service. Okay, so for case management, we are not don't register right now. We'll get that updated as we get closer to 7/1. If you are a DD provider in addition to case management for source, which I actually didn't know that was both of those, that's interesting. I'm going to have to educate myself on that. Then what you would do is you're going to want to make sure that all of your CLS numbers associated with Now and Comp are registered. If you have multiple offices, like Joe said, with multiple ID numbers, you'll need to register all of those IDs. Do we need to enter all of the provider IDs in the EVV self-registration that are affiliated with PSS? The answer to that is yes. Can all provider numbers be added together? No, they need to be added in separately. So you need to register for each ID. As Joe said, it shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. And you know, if you got a bunch of them, then it may take a little more line, but it's a pretty quick process. I registered my source number, but I don't see my clients. Okay, so for that question, I want to make sure that, because a lot of y'all have multiple IDs for multiple programs. So I want you to go back and look at your IDs and make sure that the number you registered for is associated with source. I have noticed over the last day that there are multiple folks that have registered IDs, and maybe they signed up initially for source and CCSP and ICWP, but they never took on any ICWP clients. And then I was talking to somebody yesterday who said, none of my clients are here. And when we went through it, I was like, that's because you registered your ICWP number and all your clients are in source. So your clients for source aren't going to show up in your ICWP number. If that isn't the case, after you go back and do your research on your provider IDs, please feel free to call the call center and they will walk you through it. Next question. So we have to register each number, and I was given a number for source in CCSP. The answer to that is yes. I tried to add a member last night after registration. On the training, it tells you to click the plus sign on the upper right. I don't have a plus sign.
Yeah, I can take that one, Brian. So what I heard there is they're trying to add a member. We do not allow them to add a member. All the members are coming in the feed. They can only add users, meaning aides and administrators. So members all come in the feed. There is no manually entering those.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
The next question is we use system MITC for time and attendance and TheraP for documentation and billing. We have met with both companies for EVV solution. Is there a benefit of ease of one for the other when communicating with TELUS? Yeah, that's really more of a business decision for you. So we will integrate with anybody who is a valid EVV vendor. So, you may want to have that conversation with the two of them, make sure that they're both valid, and then make a business decision on that one. The next question is, we started the client last night already and scheduled an aide. If there won't be any paper, how will we schedule? Okay, so this is again that same question of we want to add a person that isn't, and I'm guessing this is a person who isn't eligible yet. They've been referred to you, but they're going through the DFACS eligibility process. You will need to put that information on paper and document as you do now with what we call a PMAO person, a person who's not eligible. You will follow the same process you do today. When they are approved, that PA and member information will come across, and you will need to enter it in at that time. We have 2 provider IDs. Do we need to register one by one? Yes. The next question is said that one of the call center people was struggling a little bit to answer questions. So we are monitoring the call center, and we are following up with that. Keep in mind, they've only been up since yesterday. So it's, today is their second day at work. So there will undoubtedly need to be some coaching and training. I still have to be coached and trained. Joe does a good job of doing that with me sometimes. So we'll be doing that with the call center. So we appreciate that concern. And we are, just so you guys know, we are monitoring that pretty closely. Do we have to register all IDs individually? Yes, you do. You don't enter them all at the same time. You enter them individually. Once we registered, is there a place to add the additional provider IDs? Yes, you have to separately register. We are seeing clients that have been discharged a year ago in the EVV system. That is true. So we wanted to make sure in our initial load with TELUS that we didn't miss anybody. So you may have folks that are no longer you're eligible for. You just don't need to worry about them, because we wanted to make sure that if anybody had a break in service and they came back or whatever else, that we would have over a year's worth of old information in the system. You would just ignore clients that you no longer serve, as you do now. You wouldn't want to commit fraud and start billing for them, of course. So you will just ignore those clients. They're no longer in your service. And that's something that's going to happen as you go, right? You're going to have people on and off. The next question is, so we register now, we'll still be able to bill through GAMUS until 7/1. That is correct. Billing will still be available through GAMUS through 7/1. I was told to register for each Medicaid payer to deal with. So I registered for Source and CCSP, but the system did not recognize my credentials for ICWP. So you would need to call the call center and ask about that ID. They'll know if that is your ICWP number, but I would request that you go back and make sure that number that you're trying to enter is actually your ICWP number. Because most of the time when I've gotten those questions from yesterday, what was being provided was the payee number or a number that wasn't associated with EVV. So just go back and check and make sure that is your ICWP number. If it is, feel free to call the call center. Next question. There is some confusion about the provider numbers. You stated that CCSP provider number ends in B and source provider ends in D. However, I received my provider number and XXSA is for CCSP and XXSB is for source. Please explain the discrepancy. My example was fictional. I was making it up off the top of my head. There is no standard nomenclature for our IDs. It's about what you register for, right? So most of the times, if you register, your payee becomes your first ID. So your payee becomes your first ID, and then if you add, in your instance, you added CCSP first, right? So when you added CCSP, you got an A number. When you added source, you got a B number. So for your reality, that's the way it is. But in my fictional reality, I added CCSP first, and then I added an adult day health center, and it became B, right? And I didn't add my source till my fourth ID, which is D. So that's the way it works. Mine was just totally fictional. It was something I was making up on the top of my head. You need to know your provider ID numbers. That's part of you being a professional provider that we expect you to be. It is a requirement. So you need to know what your provider ID number, and it seems like you certainly do here because you got them listed. So just register that CCSP and source ID. Next question says the short name is not changeable. I think that may be one for you, Joe.
The short name is not changeable. It
Is that
is,
like,
so it's, I think what they are saying is that once you're in your portal, once you've logged in, it's not changeable. That is true. That's why it's important that when you're going through registration that you enter that short name. That's why I specifically called that out, is you're going to want to think through, what do I want my short name to be? Because that's where it's being set up in the system, is through that process. If you don't enter a short name, it's going to default, I believe, to the long name. And then you're going to have to go through support to have them go into the system and change it. And that creates a lot more work. So again, that's why we allow you to change it during registration, but you can't change it afterwards.
I think the next question is also for you. If the administrator leaves the company, how easy is it to update to a new email address administrator?
If the administrator leaves the agency, so if any employee leaves your agency, you're going to unlink that employee because they are no longer part. You don't want them being able to log into your system anymore. So there's an unlinking process. Again, that's all in the user guides and the training, how to unlink a user if you need to. Now, if you have a new administrator or a new employee come in, then you will need to add that new employee and user and their email and their phone number and all that, everything that we went through of how you set up a new user. So again, any employee that leaves, you're going to unlink them, and any new employee that comes in, you're going to add them as a new user.
So the next question is, can we register multiple administrators with the full credentials to access the administration scheduling and billing portal?
Yes, you can add as many administrators as you want. We don't limit you. Now, we do put a warning when you're selecting the role of an administrator during your setup. We have a warning on the screen that says, by giving this person the role of an administrator, you are giving them access to all of your information, which of course is a lot of PHI. So we ask you to make sure that when you're choosing the roles, that you understand what you're doing and that you're giving them access to the PHI for all of your members and authorizations and all of that. So we do have a warning just to remind you of, the seriousness of that. But we do not limit you on the number of administrators.
So the next question is, do we have a single pane for a login for all payers, source, CCSP, ICWP, GAP? I think you said you toggle in between those, correct?
That is correct. So yes, you will have one login. And if you're an administrator over multiple offices, up at the top of the portal, you will see a drop down, and this is where the short names come in. You will see a drop down, and if you have 10 offices, you'll see the short name of all 10 offices, and you just click on the office you want to go to, and then it will take you to that portal with all that information.
Next question is, what is an IVR pin? That's something we use when we have authorized telephony. That's interactive voice response. So if we have authorized an employee for telephony to use, then that is the PIN that they will put in order to verify that they have completed or started a visit. Next question is, can we terminate the user if the caregiver is no longer with the agency? And can the user have multiple email addresses in their profile?
They cannot have multiple email addresses. They can only have one email address. And if you terminate any employee, then you will unlink that employee so they don't have access anymore. So let's say it's an aide, and you terminate that aide. You just go in and you unlink them. They will no longer have access to the information from your agency, but that aide may be employed still at a different agency. So their profile will still work to log into the other agency. They just won't see your information anymore.
Thanks, Joe. I'm sorry, I lost my place. So give me a second, y'all. I gotta find my place here. Oh, found it. We're definitely not going to get through all of these questions. So let me say that I'm going to answer a few more. You can. I'm gonna advise you, first of all, to go back to the trainings that have already been done in the user guides. I don't see anything in these questions that are not in the trainings and user guides that I've seen so far. So we're going to need you to go through those registration trainings and user guides again, just to familiarize yourself with that information. We will gather up these the email questions, and I'm going to go ahead and stop here. And we will modify our frequently asked questions to accommodate these questions. You can always utilize the call center or the call center emails, and you can also use the DCH EVV mailbox, and we will respond to your questions. There's a lot of good questions out there with registration. Again, most of them are covered in the user guides, though. So please go back and look at those user guides, but we will take the time to go through each of these questions as we can to answer your questions. It is very encouraging to see all of the participation and so many questions. It lets me know that people are out there, people should be registering, and people should be starting to use the system. So that's very exciting. Okay, with that, I'm going to end us for today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. There will be another town hall meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody.